Welcome everyone. Welcome. We are so excited to have each and every one of you here today as a part of Seminary on Sunday. We have been uh, plugging along, pushing along for the last 8-9 weeks maybe. And so we have one more week. Next week, Dr. William Curtis will return along with Dr. Jared Carter, and we're going to do a closing conversation. And then we will shut down until the 1st of July, when we will begin our Seminary on Sunday, our certification program. I do want to encourage you to consider registering if you haven't, to join this ongoing work, Seminary on Sunday. You can go to seminaryonsunday.com and you can register a minimum of $50, which is non-refundable. And you have until June 15th, to finish paying the rest of it. And it's $250. It's the first semester. It's 6 months. In the second semester, which will be an additional $250, is as well $250. So we are excited about how we got here, and so early on, I wanted to introduce. I wanted to have my brother to lead a session. So I pushed him to the back, and this was actually supposed to be the last session. But we decided to add one more. And so I wanted him to kind of lead us in talking about his journey. If I can be very, very transparent, my brother has been probably one of the most influential people in my life, just period, just everything. So when you listen to me preach, a part of my approach to introductions and all that kind of stuff is the influence of my brother. And of course, because we have the same set of parents and the same blood running through us, we probably have some of the same unique approaches and challenges in life. He has been the pastor of Second Calvary Baptist Church forever, ever since I was probably in ending high school and going into college. He is truly one of my most important people in my life, and a phenomenal preacher, incredible pastor. And so he's going to talk about how to sustain excellence over 40 years of preaching, and he's going to give us some very powerful, amazing insight. I encourage you to pull out pen and paper or device and just focus, because the day is going to be incredibly insightful. And so I turn it over now to Dr. Geoffrey Guns.
Thank you, Bishop John Eric Guns, my baby brother, my favorite preacher. Thank you so very much for inviting me. I'm deeply humbled by this privilege to be a part of this very innovative platform that allows us to connect with colleagues in the ministry from across the country. Those who have preceded me have been a blessing to all of us, and they have shared their gifts, their experiences, and knowledge about preaching. The question that you gave me is one that I sat down and thought seriously about over the past several weeks. I kind of framed it this way: how do you sustain an effective, relevant preaching ministry over the long haul? In my case, it's been 42 years. How do you sustain an effective, relevant preaching ministry over the long haul? And as I said, in my case, it's been 42 years, and I really feel like I'm just beginning to learn this craft. And I'll start with this basic premise, thought that your preaching and the conduct of your ministry is the product of your socialization in life and how you are socialized in the church. It is not done in isolation from who you are, so that we're not preachers in isolation. We don't exist in a vacuum. And one of the ways to think about this is to consider that Jesus was from Nazareth, a small, insignificant village in the foothills of Galilee. And so when you think about the ministry of Jesus, Jesus was deeply concerned about those who are marginalized because he himself had come from a marginalized community. And if you know anything about that part of the Galilee, you know that Nazareth was a very insignificant, out of the way place that no one really gave a lot of attention to. Since most of you do not know me, let me kind of talk a little bit about who I am, because that's going to rather kind of give you an idea about my own ministry and the conduct of my ministry. I was born in 1949, Newport, Rhode Island. My dad was in the Navy. I was the second of 5 children. My parents are from Dothan, Alabama. I myself was educated in segregated all-Black schools, from elementary school to postgraduate. I spent 6 years in the United States Army, a commissioned officer. I was a captain. I was in the infantry, airborne ranger. So that really kind of helped shape some of my discipline and my commitment to staying with things. My parents, Frank and my mother, the late Quincy Guns, were both preachers. My dad was a pastor for 37 years at Abyssinia Baptist Church. I'm married. My wife, Rosetta, and I have 2 adult daughters, 2 grandchildren, and we've all been in this thing together. And so my wife has been my indispensable partner in the ministry and has helped me to develop in a lot of ways. She has kind of rounded out these rough edges that all of us have. I graduated from Norfolk State University in 1972 with a BS degree in business administration. I was licensed to preach in 1978 after getting out of the Army 6 years, ordained in 1979. I enrolled in the School of Theology at Virginia Union University. At that time, it was called the School of Theology at Virginia Union University. It was not the Samuel DeWitt Proctor School of Theology as it is now. I attended STVU from 1978 to 1981. And I'll say a little bit more about that in just a moment. Graduated from Howard University Divinity School in 1985 with a D-Min degree. I've had the opportunity of pastoring 2 churches. The first church that I thought I was going to pastor was New Light Baptist Church in Richmond, Virginia, while I was a student in seminary. I got strung along for about 6 months, and then finally ended up at a little small rural church, Calvary Baptist Church in Kilmarnock, Virginia. I was there for 2 years, 7 months, and 19 days. 2 years, 7 months, and 19 days. I learned a lot about ministry and preaching there. The first year I was there, no one joined the church, baptized, not a single person. A whole year, I thought something was wrong with me, with my preaching, my ministry. I thought I was an absolute failure. After all, when I graduated from seminary, I graduated from Virginia Union summa cum laude, really kind of at the head of my class, and I thought that somehow or another, at least somebody should have joined the church, but nobody joined the church the first year. I left there after those 2 years, 7 months, and 19 days, and ended up at Second Calvary Baptist Church. I preached my first Sunday sermon on the fourth Sunday in June 1983. In fact, it was June 26, 1983. I'm going to talk about sustaining preaching excellence over this period by just talking about some things that I think might be helpful to you. Maybe they will, maybe not, but I hope so. I hope that I can share some things in my own preaching journey that may be helpful to each of you. Let me just kind of start out by talking about my preaching influences. The earliest influence that I can remember in terms of preachers was the man who baptized me, Reverend William Cruz. He's still living. He lives in Detroit. I try to remember to call him from time to time. He's in his 90s now. But Reverend William Cruz, I remember listening to his powerful sermons. He was a graduate of Virginia Union. He had just graduated from Virginia Union when he came to the Mount Pleasant Baptist Church. My dad, Dr. Frank Guns, Dr. Benjamin W. Robertson, who was my supervisor when I was a student at Virginia Union. When I did my internship, I did it at Cedar Street Memorial Baptist Church of God. Learned a lot from Dr. Robertson. Dr. Charles E. Booth. I was exposed to Dr. Booth in 1978. He was still pastoring in Pennsylvania, preaching a revival in Norfolk. I was just out of the Army, had gone to attend a revival, and I met this guy, and I was so captivated by Dr. Booth that I went to the revival every single night because I just wanted to hear him preach, that deep voice, that immaculate look. I wanted to be like him. I was exposed to Dr. Charles Adams, Dr. William J. Shaw, James Henry Harris, who encouraged me to go to Virginia Union, Dr. William Augustus Jones, who pastored in New York, one of the great social justice preachers, Gardner C. Taylor, J. Alfred Smith, Dr. Harold Carter Sr., Manuel Scott, Sandy F. Ray, and Dr. C.L. Franklin. These are people very early on in my ministry that I listened to, and even today I listen to them now for to just kind of be blessed and helped and strengthened by listening to real solid preaching. I want to say some things about the influence of my seminary life, and I think if you've gone to seminary, if you're in seminary, it is the most important academic period of your life in terms of developing in ministry. My professors and instructors, they really helped shape my theological and philosophical thinking about ministry, about mission, about preaching, about church history, about Christian education, about church business management, because I had come out of the Army, and so I was just really kind of had been focused on military life. And even though I had grown up in the home of a preacher, like some people who were really kind of off on their own, I really hadn't thought a lot about it until I went to seminary. Probably one of the most influential instructors was Dr. Richard Solon, who was my New Testament professor. Really kind of helped me to understand the importance of the New Testament. Dr. Jerry Boney, my systematic theology instructor, Dr. Paul Nichols, who taught about Christian education and worship, Dr. L.T. Whitelock, who's my Old Testament professor, who really gave us, and I really learned something from him about the importance of reading the scriptures publicly. He said that the scriptures must be read as though people are listening to the very voice of God. And so that really had an impact on me. Paul says, give attention to the reading of the scriptures, in his words to Timothy. And so oftentimes we take that for granted. But got to remember that there's some people, the only time they're going to hear the scriptures read is on a Sunday morning. So Dr. L.T. Whitelock, Dr. Ralph Rivas, who was my church history instructor, really kind of gave me an appreciation for the history of the Christian faith, the history of the Black church in America, the history of the Black Baptist church. And so I've really appreciated him. Dr. John Kinney, who came in my later years, I took a course on urban ministry from Dr. Kinney. Dr. Miles Jones, I want to talk a little bit about Miles Jones and preaching and the things that I learned from Dr. Jones about preaching, because I know that this has been all about preaching. Dr. Alex B. James, my church history professor, Darrell Rollins, who exposed us to the urban ministry and the challenges of dealing with urban ministry. Each of the presenters has talked about their homiletical style and how they go about preparing sermons and the like. And so I'm just going to say some things about my own homiletical background, principles, how I go about thinking about and thinking through sermons, and then I'll say some other things on the other side of that. And I'm going to talk about lessons from Dr. Miles Jones. Dr. Jones was my homiletics professor. The one thing that Dr. Jones taught is that sermons must have structure that can be followed. And I know all of us have listened to sermons and you kind of wonder, what was he talking about? Sermons have to have structure that can be followed. That's the first thing that I want to say, is that you're preaching, people ought to leave with some idea about what it is that you're talking about. And Dr. Jones taught that a sermon should have this basic structural elements: a biblical text, a title, an introduction, a body, and a conclusion. And let me just say that again. He said that a sermon should have a biblical text. I still have these in my notes, my sermon notes. I took meticulous notes in class. A biblical text, a title, an introduction, a body, a conclusion, and that the sermon is like a well-built house, and the entry point is the porch. I remember him saying that if you want people to come into the house, then the porch must be inviting, and that's always about the introduction to the sermon. Dr. Jones taught that the introduction is the most important element of the sermon. It says, "Hey, come on in. I got something to say, and you may want to hear this." And over the years, I've learned in preaching that the most important statement that I'm going to make in the sermon is the first statement. That first sentence is the most important to me. It is the most important sentence in the sermon, because it says to people, I have something to say and I want you to listen. And so I spent a lot of time thinking about how I'm going to introduce a sermon. Dr. Jones taught that a sermon, and this was a very simple way of thinking about it, and I still use these techniques today, that in every sermon there's an A and a B part. The A part of the sermon of the introduction may be the life experiences that connects to where people are contextually, or it could be some examination of the text. And so if you begin with the text, you then move to the life experiences of the individual, where you contextualize the passage to make it live in the lives of people. Dr. Jones taught us that the charisma must be a constituent element in every sermon for it to be Christian. And so for me, even today, the charisma, the Christocentric proclamation of the life, of the birth, the life, the death, and the resurrection of Jesus Christ is a part of every sermon that I preach. Because Dr. Jones said that it is that which makes preaching Christian. And he directed us to the work of C.H. Dodd. C.H. Dodd, that book is still available today, Apostolic Preaching and Its Development. Apostolic Preaching and Its Development. And if you read C.H. Dodd's book, C.H. Dodd takes a look at all of the sermons in the book of Acts, all of the earliest Christian sermons, and concludes that in every Christian sermon, there is this charismatic content that in some way or another focuses on the death or the crucifixion of Jesus and the resurrection. It is the charismatic content is the essence of the preaching of the Apostle Paul, because if you read the writings of Paul, it is very obvious that the charisma for the preaching of the cross is to them who perish foolishness, but unto us who are saved, it is the power of God. All through Corinthians, there is this focus on the charisma, this charismatic content, because it is the charisma that brings people to the point of salvation. And so Dr. Jones taught that it was important to understand the message of the early Christian church, because that is the message that we proclaim today, that the message of the Christian faith, though we are 2,000 years removed, has not changed. It is still the same. It is still the same message that we are to preach today. And so over the years, I've tried to make sure that all of my sermons have this focus on the charisma. I've learned to begin a sermon with the end in mind. And that is, how does a text take me to the cross and resurrection? And Dr. Jones said, no matter where you start, if you start in Genesis, your sermon, in order for it to be Christian, you have to find your way to the cross, because the Bible is theologically centered on the very nature of God. And so I always try to tell our preachers, you begin your sermon with the end in mind. How are you going to end this thing? Where's it going? And I've already mentioned this about the life experiences, the A and B portion of a sermon. Dr. Jones taught us, and I still use this today, that the starting point for preaching is always about God's grace. And over the years, I've learned that a sermon has to have some aim. It needs to be pointed at getting people to do something. For instance, when Peter preached on the day of Pentecost, and at verse 37, people asked him, "Brethren, what shall we do?" What is it that you're asking me to do after listening to you? And Peter said, repent, be baptized, and receive forgiveness and the gift of the Holy Spirit. So every sermon should have built into it the answer to the question of what you want people to do. Every sermon. Because if you're not leading people to a point of decision, basically what you're doing is giving a good talk. and you're not. Jesus always pointed people to something. When he told the parable of the Good Samaritan, he said to them, "Go and do likewise." So that a message is always aimed towards doing something. And so over 42 years, I have never strayed from what I was taught. But I've only tried to perfect, to enhance, and improve on all of these lessons. I want to move from those lessons by Dr. Jones and just talk about my seminary experiences and how they helped me to lay the foundation for these 42 years of preaching. When I went to seminary, I spent most of my time in the library, reading, researching, and studying. That's what I did. I did a lot of studying. And I was also, while I was in seminary, exposed to the annual STVU convocation in November. They later changed it to the John Malchus Ellison convocation. And in seminary, I had a chance to hear some preachers that impacted my life. You know, most of us don't remember a lot of sermons that we've heard, but the ones that really touch us are the ones that we remember. And there was a Bishop Alfred G. Dunstan, who was an AME Zion bishop in Philadelphia, preached from John chapter 5, verses 1 through 9 in 1979. He preached his sermon, "The Loneliest Man in Town." I've always remembered that sermon. I remembered the points that he laid out, everything. Dr. Charles Adams, Hartford Memorial Baptist Church in Detroit. I think he's retired now. Preached a sermon, John chapter 1, verse 14, "Sermons in Flesh." Just a powerful message. Dr. William J. Shaw preached from 2 Samuel chapter 18, verse 32, where David raised the question, "Is the young man Absalom safe?" And so the title of the sermon was, "Is the young man safe?" And I still remember the points reverberating through my mind. I had a chance to hear Dr. Cyril Lincoln, who wrote the book, "The Black Church in America." In America, he and Lawrence Mamaya, they had just done that monumental study. Dr. Benjamin W. Robertson at Cedar Street Memorial Baptist Church in Richmond. And so as a student, I took all of this in, and I took very copious notes, and I still have my seminary notes today from preaching. So what seminary did was it provided me with the tools for sustaining a credible long-term pastoral ministry. That's what seminary gave me. It gave me the tools. It gave me biblical knowledge, understanding about exegesis, theological reflection, understanding the history of the Christian faith, Christian education, preaching, and Christian spirituality. All of this, everything that you learn in seminary becomes a part of that amalgam of spiritual tools that you can use for preaching. Many people go to seminary to get a ticket punched. They want that MDiv degree from STVU, Morehouse, Duke, Princeton, Howard. They want that MDiv degree because they believe it's going to help them get a bigger church. And what I did was I used the skills that I learned in seminary to really further my understanding of the Bible and the Christian church. Seminary was very important to me. And if you're going to seminary, and if you're in seminary, I encourage you to really kind of focus on learning. My post-seminary degree gave me the rudimentary fundamentals needed to move forward and to progress in my pastoral ministry. What seminary did not give me were the sophisticated tools and skills needed for dealing with difficult and often contentious interactions with church members, church leaders, and often unpredictable circumstances that derail your best sermon. Seminary didn't give me that. Seminary didn't help me to understand how to preach in a pandemic. Seminary didn't give me the skills to preach in a time when there is so much racial animus in the country. So there were some things that seminary didn't give me. And I've had to learn those over the years. When I went to Howard University in 1984, I focused my work on small group leadership. I did my DMin degree in 3 semesters. 3 semesters. I was a full-time student as a full-time pastor. I did my degree in 3 semesters. I finished all of my coursework and wrote my dissertation all at the same time. DMin studies are supposed to give you the skills for developing your present ministry context. And so my focus was on empowering the ministry leaders to lead, helping people in the church to learn to lead. And so over the years, I learned some things about that. But while I was there at Howard, I was exposed to a guy by the name of Dr. Evans E. Crawford Jr., who was the dean of the chapel. And I took a course on preaching in Genesis. And he opened my eyes to the value of preaching sermon series on whole books of the Bible. He opened my eyes to preaching themes and focusing my preaching. And so for nearly 30 years, beginning in August, I start planning my preaching for the next year, all 52 Sundays. I sit down, I find a place where I can just kind of get, and for the month of August, I plan my preaching for the whole year, every Sunday that I'm going to be preaching. I call it my preaching and worship calendar. I look at the days, the special days, the days of the lectionary, special Christian days, the calendar. And so this becomes my personal lectionary. It's a roadmap. It's the plan that I laid out. This year I've been planning to re-preach or to preach through the Gospel of Luke, but then a pandemic hit and some other things. And so a lot of times preachers will just preach all over the place. They don't have a plan. They're struggling with trying to figure out what they're going to preach, and they're trying to figure out what they're going to do from week to week. But if you sit down and you think about it, and let's say if you preach a series, if you preach, there's 66 books in the Bible. And if you were to preach through all 66 of those books, you would be preaching for 50 years because there's more to preach in the Bible than you can realize. So it's better to start with a destination than to start and not know where you're going. I'm going to allow some time for questions, and I hope this is helpful to you. So I've also learned about using the lectionary and planned preaching, seasons of the church year, the liturgical calendar, understanding the importance of things like Advent and the 12 days of Christmas. Most people think that's just a song, but it's actually 12 days of Christmas. That's a part of the original tradition of the church. 12 days of Christmas leading to the day of the Epiphany, from Christmas Day to January the 6th, when the wise men appeared to Jesus, Ascension Day, Lent, the 7 Sundays of Easter, Pentecost, Holy Days, and all of these things. So all of these become seeds for preaching during the course of the year. And so you never have to run out of material to preach because there's a lot to preach. And so I like to preach series. I like to preach through whole books of the Bible because it makes it rather simple. It feeds my devotional life. It gives structure to my Bible reading. It gives discipline. It anchors my teaching. Sometimes I'm teaching what I'm preaching. It provides the means for dealing with biblical subjects we don't like to preach about or may be afraid to touch. You want to preach about women in ministry or deacons, women deacons or women preachers, then preach through Timothy. Paul talks about it in the 3rd chapter. Preach through Acts. If there are social issues that you want to address, then preach through Amos, preach through one of the book of the prophets. The Bible deals with stuff sometimes that, sometimes we just kind of hit around things and don't really deal with them. But if you preach through a book of the Bible, you're going to eventually come across something that you don't want to talk about and only talk about, but never really give people a firm theological foundation and framework for understanding these things. In my postdoctoral influences in terms of my preaching, I've learned to listen to older preachers. I've learned to listen to older preachers. I was talking once, and I was preaching probably last year, and I said the old preacher used to say, and when we got home, my wife said, you ought to stop saying the old preacher used to say, because you are the old preacher now. You become the old preacher. And so old preachers, there was a guy by the name of W. Bernard Sheely at First Baptist Church, Jefferson Park in Newport News, who told me once, he said, son, preaching is your salvation. Preaching is your salvation. If you're a pastor, you earn your right to lead by preaching. By preaching. It is the preaching of the gospel that gives you the authority to speak into the life of people. Guy by the name of Dr. L.C. Taylor at Emmanuel Baptist Church taught me about being patient with people. My mother taught me something about diplomacy. She taught me a lesson that I've never forgotten, and I tell all of our preachers this: that you learn to preach and teach the people as opposed to preaching at them or about them, or fussing and arguing with people. Because there are times, as a pastor, you're dealing with stuff and people can really piss you off. And so you go to the pulpit on Sunday, you get them told, you're telling them off, you're putting them in their place and all of that. I remember once I was so angry with some folk that I told them in the sermon that I don't care if you leave, I hope you leave. And some left. Not the people that I wanted to leave, but the people who got tired of me fussing. I had this radio broadcast, and my mama told me, she said one day, she asked me, she said, son, who are you mad at in the church? She said, who are you mad at? I said, well, mother, I'm not mad at anybody. She said, I could hear it in your voice. I could hear that you were angry with people. She said, you can't build the church. See, the Lord wants you to edify the people, build them up. And I had to learn that I could not change the direction of the church, not capture the hearts of the minds of the majority of the people by giving them a biblical tongue lashing every Sunday. And sometimes you hear preachers do that. You hear preachers who get up, and I tell our preachers that it's not their job to put the people in place. If you're preaching for your pastor, it's not your job to check folk or to get them straight. That's his job. That's her job. It's not yours. You don't have the authority to correct people in the church. That's not your place. If you're preaching, you have the privilege of helping to edify, not to tear down. And so for 42 years of preaching and teaching and creating a learning community in the church, I've learned a lot of things about preaching. One of the criticisms I would have of preaching today is that it is built around anecdotal euphemisms. Pointless platitudes that celebrate the faith without drawing individuals to the point of making a critical decision about serving Jesus Christ. Just pointless platitudes that celebrate the faith, but they never draw people into this critical point of living for Christ. Your season is arriving today. Your elevation is just around the corner. Your next level is on the way. Your time of sorrow is over and it's ending today. And so what happens when you run out of elevations and you run out of this kind of stuff to talk about? The tools that I've used over the past 42 years that have strengthened my preaching and teaching ministry are the things that I use today to sustain me. I have, I just want to throw this in. I have intentionally remained a denominational church, supporting my local association, my state convention, my national convention, NBC USA Inc. I've been a part of the Christian church, the Christian heritage. It's 2,000 years of Christian faith. And one of the things that I've tried to say to the members of our congregation, and one of the things that you say in preaching, is that you help people to understand who they are in Christ and how they can appreciate the church. My last few pages, and I'll send you these notes if you want them, if you think they have any value to you. I'll send them to my brother, and then he can disseminate them to you. I think that if you're going to sustain yourself in preaching, becoming a sound biblical student, understanding the importance of biblical studies, reading the Bible, biblical interpretation, biblical exegesis, understanding the history of interpretation, the application of scripture, learning how to study the Bible. That is the most critical thing that I think that goes into sound preaching. When I graduated from seminary, I knew how to use exegesis, but I didn't know how to take exegesis and then have that give me the tools necessary to become a sound interpreter of the faith. And so a great deal of my personal study has focused on how to study, how to interpret, how to understand the meaning of scripture in its historical, its cultural, its social and political context, understanding the importance of reading and learning about the influences that shape the teaching and the preaching of Jesus, so that Jesus did not live in a vacuum, but in a real world context. And so that many of the examples that Jesus used were those that were a part of the everyday life and understanding, and the teaching, some of it were drawn from rabbinic teachings that Jesus may have heard. And so teaching the members of the church how to read, study, and understand and interpret the Bible is a pastor's most important task. Equipping the members so that they can help you teach. Understanding and doing historical studies, the history of the Christian faith, the development of the foundations of the faith, and understanding the importance of the apostolic age and the apostolic fathers and the first 300 years of the history of the Christian faith. Much of what we try to do has no basis in the New Testament. These things were developed in subsequent years. And so to understand the role, understanding the role of the bishop, which was really taught by Ignatius of Antioch in the 2nd century. Most preachers don't read this stuff. They're not interested in it. But I want to challenge you to become an even greater student. When I was in seminary, I was exposed to neo-Orthodox theologians. And so that theological reflection has had a great deal of helping to shape my philosophical understanding about ministry. Reading Paul Tillich, his 3 volumes of systematic theology, H. Richard Niebuhr and Reinhold Niebuhr and Emil Brunner and Karl Barton, Rudolf Buchmann and Martin Buber, all of these neo-Orthodox theologians, so that my preaching then is really based upon an existential, experiential understanding of the scriptures. Reading the works of Missy J. Smith, I Found God in Me, a womanist biblical hermeneutics reader, understanding how to read different things. Peter Paris, Social Teachings of Black Church, James Cone, God of the Oppressed, J. Deotis Roberts, Black Political Theology. All of these people have helped to shape my understanding about justice and injustice. C. Eric Lincoln and Lawrence Mamaya, The Black Church in the African American Experience, Henry Mitchell, Black Church Beginnings, Albert Rabbitoe, Slave Religion, understanding that. And Bishop Joseph A. Johnson, the Church of God in Christ, PhD, who wrote a powerful book on proclamation theology. That is just a real standard. Kane Hope Felder, Troubling Biblical Waters, and other things. And so understanding all of this learning has an impact upon how you sustain yourself in preaching. Understanding Black church studies. I once had a conversation with my brother, and this was when he was a younger person. He said to me, "Why are you always talking about Black folks and black this and Black that?" And I said, "John, I preach to Black people. That's who I preach to. I preach to Black people. I preach to people who are hurting, who are struggling, children who are confused today. A lot of our people are confused right now. They're hurting. They don't know which way to turn. And the preacher has the responsibility of speaking into the life of our people today and offering them hope. Our young people, they don't know anything about our heritage. And when you disconnect yourself from the history of the church and the history of the Black church, you disconnect yourself from the roots that give you life. All of that is a part of who we are. And that's what I tell my people. The last thing I'll say here is about the importance of Christian travel. I know a lot of people don't like to go places. I like to travel. My New Testament professor, Dr. Richard Solon, was in a class once. He was teaching about the journeys of Paul, and he talked about he had gone to Ephesus. And I asked him, I said, "Can you really go to those places?" He said, "Yeah, those places exist." And so I've been to the Holy Land 14 times. And so when you look at a map and you see the Sea of Galilee, I see the hills. I see the water, the blue water. I see the Golan Heights. I see where Capernaum was. I see the Jordan River. I see those places in my mind. So when I read the Bible, I not only read the words, but I see Jericho. I see the palms of Jericho that Joshua talked about. I see those things. So Christian travel is very important. I've been to Turkey 7 times. One of the most overlooked facets of biblical studies is geography. Everything in the Bible takes place somewhere. Everything. There's not an event in the Old Testament that does not take place somewhere. It takes place somewhere. Everything takes place. And so sometimes the place has significance. I always like to use this example, the example of Shechem. What is the significance of Shechem in the Old Testament? A lot of great significant events take place at Shechem. I've been to Mount Carmel, and you know the passage where Elijah is on Mount Carmel and Jezebel says that she's going to kill him, and then the next few verses he's in Beersheba. Most people may not even realize that for Elijah to get from Beersheba, from Mount Carmel to Beersheba, 109 miles in about a day or so. he had to be moving. He left immediately to go to Beersheba. He went all the way down past Jerusalem to Beersheba, to places that are not even mentioned outside of Abraham, Beersheba. So I traveled to all of those places. I've been everywhere the Apostle Paul has gone, with the exception of Malta and Cyprus. I've been to all those places. So I have a different perspective when I read the Bible, when I talk about the travels of the Apostle Paul. I've been to all of the cities of the 7 churches. I was listening to one of our denominational preachers preach one day, and he was preaching about Sardis. And I leaned over to the president of the National Baptist Congress, and I said, when he goes to Sardis, he'll preach that differently. And he says, how do you know? I says, because I've been there several times. And what he's talking about does not exist. He read something that somebody wrote in a commentary. So, there's real value in preaching. So let me close by giving you my skills that every preacher needs if you're going to sustain your preaching. Every preacher needs these skills. Number 1, preaching. Mastering, learning how to preach. You will never learn how to preach like you want to preach. You're always perfecting your preaching. Number 2, teaching and studying the Bible, becoming a real student of the Bible, and becoming a real solid teacher of the Bible. I just hate it when Black folks say that the only people who can really teach them are white folks. That just troubles me to no end. Don't get me. I don't want to get started on my racial thing today. Number 3, leading congregational change, understanding how to lead congregational change and how to incorporate that in your preaching, how to incorporate it in your teaching, leading congregational change. Number 4, I think the 4th skill that every preacher needs to develop are people skills, how to get along with people, how to work with people, how to be diplomatic, and how you deal with people. Number 5, writing skills. I think that probably one of the most embarrassing things that I've seen is to read the writing of some preachers. It's terrible. Writing skills and grammar skills. Understanding the importance of grammar. The Bible is a literary document. And so you read it like you read any other writing, understanding that it's, there are verbs and nouns and their tenses, and all of this adds meaning to Scripture. Number 6 is critical thinking, being able to critically think through issues and things that we to confront. Number 7, the capacity to envision the future. I wrote a post on Facebook May 11th that churches who seek to be what they used to be will not become the people God is calling them to be in the future. Helping your people to envision a different future, not the future. The world changed on March 16th. At least for me it did, because I woke up with a new normal. My congregation is not gathered since the 15th of March. And so I had to begin to think about things in a whole different way. The organization and planning skills, how to organize people, how to plan, how to get things done, how to implement a vision, organization, planning. People look to the pastor for that. Motivation skills. How do you motivate people? How do you get people to do things that you want them to do? And one of the ways you learn to be a good motivator is by looking at the lessons of great leaders. How do they motivate people? And a preacher motivates by the preaching of the gospel, by teaching people, by encouraging. And then lastly, spiritual formation. how do you help people to grow in their relationship with Jesus Christ? Helping people to grow, to develop, to become what the Lord wants them to be. That is, I think that those are among the most important skills. If someone were to ask me, what are these top 10 things you think I should learn? Those are the things that I think that you should learn. And those are the things that I think will sustain you through 40 years of preaching and beyond. I want to thank my brother. Thank you all for listening. Sorry if I took so much of your time just talking, but I wanted to try to answer the question without a lot of euphemisms and, really just kind of base it upon my own experience. So thank you a lot, Bishop John E. Guns.
First of all, I want to thank you. I was texting, Napoleon texted me and said, I love your brother. And I said, he is the most methodical man I've ever met. He has an exact approach to almost everything he does. And let me tell you why I wanted him. This has nothing to do with the fact that he's my brother, even though he's my brother. He has taught me, and those who are in Kingdom Fellowship, if you notice this trait about me, he has taught me the necessity of being sophisticated as a thinker. I'm not known, and this is gonna sound real crazy, I'm not really known as a preacher. Well, maybe a little bit. But the thing that people say about me is that, oh, you're such a thinker. I got it from my brother. I got my thinking skill set from my brother. He has taught me over the years. My favorite Geoffrey Guns story was I was in undergrad, and I needed some money because I was broke. And my brother did something interesting. For about 2 weeks, I complained I had no money. One day, Jermaine, my brother says to me, he says, man, you complain about you have no money. He says, have you looked in your psychology book? I looked in like page 10. He put $20 in my psychology book. And then he says to me, it pays to read. From that day, I've been opening books looking for money. Because literally that changed my understanding. And so for most of us in ministry, we are only working on the crafting of a sermon. We're not working on the crafting of the preacher. We're only working at how to write sermons. We're not working at how to become a better preacher. So I want to thank my brother. Does anybody have any questions for him? Does anybody have any questions? Napoleon literally put every piece of note he could put down here. Does anybody have any questions? Any questions? You can put them in the chat. I do want you, as we've done all every week, his Cash App is let's make sure is, it's real simple. It's $ Pastor Guns, Guns Guns, $ Pastor Guns, Guns Guns. Sometimes people misspell our name and put Guns, but it is one N, one S. It's $ Pastor Guns. Please, as we've done with everybody, go now to his Cash App and please thank him for his 42 years of service, for his wisdom, for his insight. I wouldn't trade being the Guns for nothing in the world. I wouldn't trade it because I got a chance to hang out with Frank and Quincy and Geoffrey all my life. So are there any questions or comments? I do want to encourage that everybody will go, everybody who can and will, you would consider, and I'm gonna encourage you to consider registering for a seminary on Sunday. Registering for seminary on Sunday. It is absolutely gonna be, it's groundbreaking that out of this pandemic, where my wife isn't here, out of this pandemic, something came that focuses on preaching. We already have about 39 people registered, and we have yet to push it really hard out on social media. If you know of other pastors who you think need to register. If you know of pockets of relationships, like circles of preachers that we can offer this to, please, if you will, Napoleon, put your name and the email address again, and we would love to have you to reach out to us. We have 100 slots, and we want to impact preaching globally. Next week, we conclude with Dr. William Curtis and Dr. Jerry Carter having a conversation. We're calling it our closing conversation, and they will be with us next week. And then we're going to take 3 weeks off, and then we start the Seminary on Sunday. It will be a certification program. Again, we have Dr. John Kinney, we have Dr. Carolyn Knight, Dr. Claiborne Lee, Dr. Jared Carter, Dr. Christopher Davis. We're trying to confirm Dr. Gina Stewart, but if not, we're going to move Dr. Kim Credit or Dr. Teresa Fry Brown in that slot. So, as you see, we are moving forward, and we are committed to doing this. So again, $ Pastor, Guns, Pastor Guns. Please Cash App him, be a blessing to him. And anyone who wants to connect to us for Seminary on Sunday, please register. I just believe that all 100 slots are going to be gone. And truthfully, just very transparently, a lot of times preachers are the worst ones to try to get us to commit to something and that quite frankly requires more than 2 or 3 days. 6 months of committing to being a better preacher, a year of committing to being a better preacher will make you absolutely tremendous. And to be very transparent, I think preaching today is too important because there are no crowds, there are no organs, even if you got the little organ thing, the organ app, there are no crowds. So content is the only thing that defines effectiveness. And the best way to get effective is to work at it. If you are, and I hate this term, an associate minister, and you want to advance your preaching, this is the best way to do it outside of preaching every Sunday. And so I'm encouraging you to register. $50 non-refundable. You can go right now to seminaryonsundays.com, put in your email address, and then the rest will take you. Please take advantage. I'm not just selling slots. I am so committed to improving the quality of preaching globally. And it begins with the voice of the Black preacher. If others join us, fine, but the focus is going to be on Black preaching and on being effective in this generation. And for all that we've seen, preaching is more important now than we've ever seen. So thank you all again for coming on today. We have one more session. We have one more session for next week, and then we will go into Seminary on Sunday. Please register. Again, we have, I think we have 39 or 40 now. Please register. If you know of people that you want to recommend it to, the flyers on social media, and please share it and encourage friends and family and brothers and sisters in ministry to join as well. Final thing, you can go to either my page or go to my church's page or go to my church's page, and you can look at ageism in the pulpit, racism in the pulpit, and sexism in the pulpit. Dr. Jerry Carter, Cynthia Hale, Elaine Flake, and some others spent 3 weeks with me talking through these 3 topics, and I absolutely want to encourage you to take advantage of just watching them and just kind of picking up. And all of these sessions are available as well. Napoleon, if you can put in the chat where they can go and watch all of the Seminary on Sunday sessions, so that you can just kind of get a feel of everybody who's been presenting. And all of them have been amazing. Jamal Bryan and Jerry Carter and Greg Howard and I mean it's been Gina Stewart, Kim Credit. It's been amazing. And so please take advantage of all of them. And it's in the chat now, and you can go and you can follow it. As always, Dr. Guns, I'm always inspired by you, and I'm grateful. And I'm gonna call your daddy and tell him you did well today. I'm gonna call your daddy tell him he can be proud of you. The greatest testimony of my brother's ministry is when my dad and my mom retired from Abyssinia, they became members of the Second Calvary Church. So my dad goes to Second Calvary every Sunday. Well, of course, it's not now, but he was going almost every Sunday. He was going to church. And my brother served as his pastor, my mom's pastor, in her final days. So it's amazing. Keep studying, keep reading, keep growing. Please go to Bishop Pastor Guns right now. $ Pastor Guns, and be a blessing to him. Love you guys. Thank you all. Register for Seminary on Sunday. You will not regret it. I promise you. If it doesn't make you a better preacher, we'll give you your money back. And I am promising you that we will do that. Be blessed, everybody. One more week, and then we move to the next phase of the vision of Seminary on Sunday. Be blessed, everybody. Thank you, Dr. Guns. You the man. You the man. Be blessed, everybody. Have a great night.